On a busy street corner, a mother's desperate voice echoed through the air as she performed to raise money for her sick son's treatment. Her child rested wearily in her arms as she poured her heart into every note. She was completely unaware that Mariah Carey had stopped her sleek black Mercedes to hear the song, and her presence was about to change everything. The cold emptiness of the children's hospital pressed down as Amanda Taylor sat in the brightly lit consultation room, her 3-year-old son Liam on her lap. The clinical white walls adorned with colorful animal decals seemed to mock the gravity of the situation unfolding within. Liam, oblivious to the tension in the room, played quietly with a worn teddy bear, its matted fur a testament to countless nights of comfort. Dr. Evelyn Carter, a specialist pediatric oncologist with kind eyes and graying hair, sat across from them. Her desk was covered with an array of scan results and medical charts, each one a piece of the puzzle that made up Liam's condition. The doctor's hands moved deliberately as she began to speak, her voice carrying both professional authority and genuine compassion. "Amanda," Dr. Carter began, her eyes meeting the young mother's gaze. "I'm afraid the results of Liam's latest tests confirm our worst fears. He has stage 4 neuroblastoma." Amanda's grip on Liam tightened involuntarily, her heart racing as she struggled to process the words. "Stage 4, she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Carter nodded solemnly. "Yes. The cancer has spread from his adrenal gland to parts of his left kidney." She reached for one of the scans on her desk, holding it up to the light. "If you look here," she said, pointing to various areas on the image, "you can see the progression of the disease." Amanda leaned forward, her eyes straining to make sense of the grainy black and white image. To her untrained eye, it was a confusing mess of shadows and shapes, but in Dr. Carter's experienced hands, it became a map of her son's illness. "What does this mean for Liam?" Amanda asked, her voice trembling. "How long?" She couldn't bring herself to finish the question. Dr. Carter set the scan down, her expression softening. "Amanda, I want to be honest with you. Without aggressive intervention, Liam may only have 6 months, possibly up to a year at best." The words hit Amanda like a physical blow. She instinctively pulled Liam closer as if she could shield him from the harsh reality with her embrace. The little boy, sensing his mother's distress, looked up at her with wide, innocent eyes. "Mama?" he said, his small voice cutting through the heavy silence that had fallen over the room. Amanda forced a smile, running her hand over Liam's bald head. "It's okay, sweetie," she murmured, though she felt anything but okay. Dr. Carter leaned forward, her voice taking on a more hopeful tone. "However, I want to emphasize that with proper treatment, including surgery and immunotherapy, many children achieve remission or prolonged survival. We've seen remarkable progress in recent years with these treatments." Amanda nodded, clinging to this glimmer of hope. "And the treatment? When can we start?" Dr. Carter's expression shifted slightly, a hint of concern creeping into her features. "Amanda, we've been having these consultations for some time now. I have to ask, what's preventing you from moving forward with Liam's treatment?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unavoidable. Amanda's composure, which she had been desperately trying to maintain, finally cracked. Tears welled up in her eyes as she tried to explain. "Our insurance," she began, her voice thick with emotion. "It only covers basic chemotherapy, consultations and diagnostic tests. I can't afford the recommended surgery and immunotherapy." The absence of her late husband weighed heavily on her in that moment. If he were still alive, maybe they could have managed. But as a single mother working multiple jobs just to keep a roof over their heads, the cost of advanced cancer treatment seemed insurmountable. Dr. Carter nodded with understanding, her eyes filled with sympathy. "I see. I'm so sorry, Amanda. I know how difficult this must be for you." She paused, considering her next words carefully. "We'll continue with the basic chemotherapy to give Liam the best chance possible under these circumstances. And I promise you we'll explore every option available to us." Amanda nodded, grateful for the doctor's compassion but feeling utterly helpless in the face of her son's illness and the financial barriers that stood in the way of his treatment. As the consultation drew to a close, Dr. Carter stood and walked around her desk, placing a comforting hand on Amanda's shoulder. "We're not giving up, Amanda. Liam is a fighter and we'll be fighting right alongside him." Amanda looked up at the doctor, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she managed to say, her voice barely audible. As they left the consultation room, Amanda held Liam's hand, his small body feeling more fragile than ever. The colorful animal decals on the walls now seemed to blur together, a kaleidoscope of false cheer in a world that had suddenly become very dark and uncertain. The bright white lights of the hospital corridor gave way to the softer glow of the billing counter. Amanda, with Liam still in her hold, approached the desk. The clerk behind the counter, a middle-aged woman with a kind face, looked up as they approached. "Hello, Mrs. Taylor," she greeted, recognizing them from their frequent visits. "How can I help you today?" Amanda shifted Liam to her hip, freeing one hand to reach for her wallet. "I need to settle today's bill, please," she said, her voice still raw from the emotional consultation. The clerk nodded, turning to her computer. Her fingers flew over the keyboard as she pulled up the day's charges. After a moment, she looked back at Amanda. "The total for today's consultation, imaging, and chemotherapy session comes to $500. Amanda's heart sank at the figure, even though she had been expecting it. She wordlessly handed over her insurance card, praying silently that there wouldn't be any issues with the coverage. The clerk processed the card, her eyes scanning the screen. After what felt like an eternity to Amanda, she smiled. "Good news, Mrs. Taylor. Today's treatment is fully covered by your insurance." A small wave of relief washed over Amanda, but it did little to ease the overall burden of their situation. She knew that this basic coverage, while helpful, fell far short of what Liam truly needed. "Thank you," Amanda said, managing a weak smile as she took back her insurance card. As they left the billing counter, Amanda felt the weight of their financial reality pressing down on her. The relief of having today's treatment covered was overshadowed by the knowledge that the life-saving treatments Liam needed remained far out of reach. They made their way through the hospital's sliding doors and into the parking lot. The afternoon sun beat down on them, a stark contrast to the air-conditioned interior of the hospital. Amanda walked with Liam to their old, weathered van, its faded paint and rust spots a testament to years of use and minimal maintenance. Opening the side door, Amanda carefully placed Liam in his car seat. The seat itself was a salvaged one, acquired secondhand when their original had been damaged in a minor accident. The broken seatbelt served as a stark reminder of their financial situation, a small repair that had to be postponed in favor of more pressing needs. As she secured Liam in the seat, using a makeshift strap to compensate for the broken belt, Amanda felt a wave of maternal guilt wash over her. She knew the seat wasn't ideal, but it was the best she could manage given their circumstances. Closing the door, Amanda made her way to the driver's seat. As she sat behind the wheel, Dr. Evelyn's words echoed in her mind. The desperate need for treatments they couldn't afford, the ticking clock on Liam's life without proper intervention. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles turning white as she fought back a fresh wave of tears. Starting the engine, which sputtered to life after a few tries, Amanda pulled. Mariah Carey had always been the shining star on stage, but her life wasn't just about music. In fact, being famous was often far more complex than it seemed. While her world was filled with glittering awards and unforgettable performances, there was another side to it: loneliness and chaos. One evening, after finishing up at the studio, she climbed into her car, ready to head to a private meeting. As she checked her phone, a few messages popped up on the screen. One was from an old friend, Jay, someone she hadn't heard from in years. Jay had been her mentor in the early stages of her career, but they'd lost touch over time. Mariah couldn't help but feel a mix of curiosity and unease when she saw the message. "Mariah, I need to see you. There's a lot we need to talk about." Jay's message stirred up a flood of memories, and for a brief moment she wondered if reaching out to him was a good idea. Deep down, something inside her warned that meeting Jay again could open up a can of worms that might be better left closed. But another part of her, the part that was always looking for closure, couldn't resist. "All right, I'll meet you," she typed back, her fingers shaking slightly. Later that evening, she found herself sitting at a small, dimly lit cafe, nervously awaiting Jay's arrival. The place wasn't one of her favorites, but it held sentimental value. Years ago, before the paparazzi started following her every move, she and Jay had spent countless hours here, talking about her dreams, the industry, and everything in between. Back then they were a team, but now it felt like a lifetime ago. When she walked in, her eyes immediately landed on Jay, who was sitting at a corner table. As soon as he saw her, he stood up with a grin. But Mariah could sense the tension in his smile. Something wasn't right. "Mariah, it's good to see you," Jay said, his voice warm but with a slight edge. Mariah smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Jay, why are we here? What's going on?" Jay took a deep breath, his eyes searching hers. "Mariah, there's something I've been meaning to tell you for a long time. But first I need to know, how have you managed to stay so far away for all these years?" Mariah felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She knew Jay well enough to understand that this wasn't just a casual reunion. There was something important, something urgent he wanted to say. "I had to distance myself," she replied carefully, because the industry, the fame, it was starting to take its toll. And I didn't want to lose myself. Jay nodded slowly as if he'd been expecting that answer. "I understand. But the question is, Mariah, how much longer can you keep running from it? From everything? From the truth?" Mariah frowned. "What truth? What are you talking about?" Jay leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The truth about this industry, about the price of fame. You think you've made it, but there's a price. And that price is higher than you think." Mariah sat back in her chair, her mind racing. She'd heard these kinds of warnings before from people she trusted, from people who cared. But Jay, he was someone who had always believed in her, had always supported her. So why did his words feel like a warning? Like a threat? "Jay, I don't have time for this. If you're here to tell me I've made a mistake, I'm not interested." But Jay shook his head. "I'm not here to tell you that, Mariah. I'm here to warn you. Fame, it doesn't give you what you think it does. It takes more than it ever gives. You've seen the surface, the red carpets, the awards, the sold-out shows. But there's another side. There's the loneliness, the manipulation, the endless demands from people who only want to use you. You're caught in a game and you don't even know it." Mariah felt a chill run down her spine. She wasn't new to the pressures of the entertainment industry, but Jay's words hit harder than anything she'd ever heard before. "I'm not a victim, Jay. I've worked hard for everything I have. I've earned my place here." "I'm not saying you haven't," he replied, his tone softening. "But there's more to it than hard work. You have to understand that sometimes the people closest to you aren't always what they seem. They don't always have your best interests at heart. And the higher you rise, the more you become a target." Mariah's mind flashed to the faces of her closest confidants, her team, the people who had been with her since the beginning. Could they be hiding something from her? Was there something they weren't telling her? "You're starting to sound paranoid," she said, trying to dismiss the growing unease. "These are just rumors, Jay. I've made it this far without letting anyone pull me down." Jay's gaze hardened. "You've made it far, but at what cost? Tell me, Mariah, how much of yourself have you really kept intact? How much of the real Mariah Carey is still there beneath the superstar persona? And how much of that is just an image you've created for the world to see?" Mariah felt a knot form in her throat. She wasn't sure how to answer him. It was true, she had built a persona over the years, a carefully crafted image of strength and success. But what about the woman behind the mask? Was she still the same person? "Jay, I don't know what you're trying to do, but I'm not going to let you scare me into believing something that isn't true." Jay leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "I'm not trying to scare you, Mariah. I'm just trying to make you see the truth. You're at a crossroads right now. You can keep going down this path, the one where you keep chasing fame and validation, or you can stop and ask yourself, what do you really want? Because if you don't, someone else will decide for you." Mariah stared at him, the weight of his words settling in. She had always prided herself on being in control of her own destiny. But now she couldn't help but wonder if Jay was right. Was she really in control, or had she been drifting along, caught in a current she couldn't escape? "I need time to think about this," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jay nodded, standing up as he reached for his jacket. "Take all the time you need. But remember, Mariah, the longer you wait, the more you risk losing. Time doesn't stand still for anyone. Mariah sat alone in her car after the meeting, the weight of Jay's words still pressing heavily on her mind. The neon lights from nearby billboards cast an eerie glow over the city streets as she stared out the windshield. The bustling world outside felt so far removed from the world she had known for years. An illusion of glamour, success, and adoration. Yet now it all seemed hollow. Her fingers rested on the steering wheel, her thoughts a jumble of questions that had never seemed so urgent. What did she really want? She had spent so much of he. The rhythmic hum of the engine was a small comfort, but it couldn't drown out the disquiet in her heart. She thought about the relationships she had cultivated in her life, the ones that seemed genuine, yet felt so fragile. Was she truly connected to anyone, or had she become just another celebrity in a long line of faces? Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft ping from her phone. A message from her manager Caroline appeared on the screen. "We need to discuss your upcoming performance in LA. The producers are expecting an answer by tomorrow." Mariah's finger hovered over the screen for a moment. The pressure to maintain the facade was relentless, but was it what she really wanted? She realized that the performance, the music, the awards, With a heavy sigh, Mariah put her phone down. It was time to make some changes. Real changes. She couldn't keep ignoring the cracks in her carefully constructed world. She needed to step away to find herself again. But how? Where would she go? And more importantly, how would she explain this to the world that expected her to? Her phone rang and the sound startled her. It was Caroline. With a quick glance. "Mariah, I know you're busy, but we really need to discuss the LA show," Caroline said, her voice smooth but with an underlying urgency. "The producers are counting on you. This performance could be huge for your career. Think about the PU." Mariah hesitated, her grip tightening on the steering wheel. "Caroline," she began, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her, "I need to take a step back from all of this." There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and Mariah felt a pang of guilt. She knew how much pressure Caroline was under to keep her on top, to keep her as the shining star in the public eye. But at this moment, Mariah knew she had to be true to herself. "Mariah," Caroline's voice softened, a touch of concern breaking through the professional tone. "Are you sure about this? You've work." "I know," Mariah replied quietly. "But I can't keep ignoring how I feel. I need to." Another pause. "Okay," Caroline said finally, her voice resigned but understanding. "We'll hold off on the LA show for now. Just let me know if you see it." "Thank you," Mariah whispered before hanging up. The decision was made. She didn't know what the future would look like or where her path would lead, but she couldn't keep living for the spotlight, for the applause of an audience that only knew the persona she created. She needed to rediscover herself, away from the fame and the expectations. It wasn't going to be easy, but she was ready to take the first step. As the city lights blurred past her window, Mariah started the drive home, her heart lighter than it had been in years. She wasn't sure what awaited her, but she knew it was time to start living for herself, not for the world that had always demanded so much from her. Meanwhile, back on the busy street corner, Amanda Taylor's voice wavered as she continued singing for her son's treatment. She was still unaware that her life was about to change too. Mariah's car, having been parked nearby after her quiet reflection, slowly turned onto the street. Her eyes were drawn to the sound of Amanda's voice, fragile and raw, cutting through the air. She rolled the window down, hearing the desperation, the hope in each note. Mariah's heart stirred as she listened, the words echoing in her mind. Without thinking, she stepped out of the car, her footsteps bringing her closer to the small crowd gathered around Amanda. She saw the mother, exhausted and determined, singing despite her circumstances. As Mariah approached, she saw Liam, his pale face resting in his mother's arms, his small hand reaching out toward the sound of the music. In that moment, something in Mariah's soul shifted. She knew what she had to do. "Excuse me," Mariah called softly, her voice cutting through the music. Amanda turned, startled, but when she saw who it was, her eyes widened in disbelief. "Mariah Carey," she whispered. Mariah smiled gently, her voice sincere. "I heard your song. It's beautiful. Your strength, it moved me. I want to help." How much do you need for your son's treatment? Amanda blinked, her mind struggling to catch up. What? I want to help you with the treatment costs, Mariah repeated, stepping closer. Let me pay for Liam's surgery and immunotherapy. Whatever it takes. Tears welled up in Amanda's eyes as she looked at Mariah, unable to believe what she was hearing. Felt like a dream. Mariah continued, her voice filled with quiet determination. No mother should have to choose between saving their child's life and paying for their treatment. You've already done so much, and I want to help make sure Liam gets the care he deserves. Amanda's hands shook as she clutched Liam to her chest, overwhelmed by the unexpected generosity. I don't know what to say, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. This means everything to me. Mariah gently placed a hand on Amanda's shoulder. You don't have to say anything. Just know that Liam is going to get the help he needs. I'm here for you. As Amanda nodded, overwhelmed with gratitude, Mariah's heart swelled with a sense of fulfillment she hadn't felt in years. In helping another, she had finally found a way to help herself, by using her fame not for validation, but for something far more meaningful. For connection, for love, and for hope. And for the first time in a long while, Mariah Carey felt truly at peace.